Welcome into the Sports Objective. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a great show. I promise you tonight. We try to do shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right here on Facebook Live and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Bubba, we've got a very special guest tonight.
Absolutely. Very excited to have him back on the program. We caught up with him multiple times during the 2019 season. Welcome back, Rene Ingoglia from ESPN. Rene, glad you could be with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Now we got a little video to go with it, too, so good stuff.
We're moving up in the world, Rene.
Yeah.
Rene, you actually are a detective by day and sports analyst for football by night. How are things down in Orlando? And ask you before we get started with football.
The funny thing is, if you ask my bosses or my coworkers in the Orlando police, they think I'm a part-time cop and a full-time broadcaster. So things are good. I think, like I was telling you guys off air, I haven't missed a day of work since the coronavirus has happened, and so we've been busy. Crime was down a little bit, but it's back up there. So it's kind of been surreal for me and my partners because, I work every day, interviewing people, going to hospitals, going in people's houses, interviewing people, arresting people. So, my day-to-day job hasn't changed. We're social distancing and doing what we're supposed to do, but been to work every day. I haven't been able to sit home, I guess, like everyone else, which is kind of probably a blessing because people are just kind of cooped up, ready to get out. And, of course, Orlando, weather has been really good here, been really warm, and I think that's helped. And people are out and about. And, of course, we opened up our state even more so today. So I think almost all businesses are open, even non-essentials. And I think restaurants went to 50% capacity today. So we're moving in the right direction.
And noticing there's no accident. It's tourist season. So being in the month of May, but right before Memorial Day, you better get your act together, right? As far as you're trying to make money and you look at between now and Labor Day, that's your biggest time, right? I would think.
It is. Yeah, and it's good for the restaurants, but I mean, it's so hard for, obviously my boss, if you will, Walt Disney World, closed down. I think they're just starting to open up some restaurants. Universal's starting to open up their restaurants, but of course, with the parks being closed, that's big. And then, of course, International Drive here in Orlando, a bunch of conferences, all that kind of stuff is canceled. So it's tough on a lot of different people, a lot of different industries, but I think as a country, I think we're moving in the right direction. And as we move towards summer here, I think we're going to be in good shape.
I want to ask you as far as another non-football question. What about Walt Disney World, Universal? Are you hearing a timetable whenever they're going to open up? I mean, my kids it's funny now that we can't go. This is when they want to go the most.
Yeah, right. I know that the state has reached out to them and said, hey, give us your plan of how you want to open, what you're going to do, so forth and so on. So, there's a lot of smart people that make a lot of money putting their heads together, and they'll figure it out, and they'll get it open. There's no doubt about it. But I think everyone's just frustrated. I think state to state, everyone's frustrated. But I think everyone's done their part, really. We've done an excellent job, I think, as a nation, flattening the curve, right? That's what we were told. Let's flatten that curve. Let's get the hospital rooms open. Let's not flood the hospitals. And I think as a nation, I'm really proud, boy. I tell you, state to state, everybody did what they were supposed to do. And I think we're moving to the next step in this country.
Yeah, that's one of those things. So many people, like we discussed off the air, are so frustrated having been cooped up for 2+ months now. And I think, there's so many folks, just their frustration and that are just talking about the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders and all those things, and just the impact it's had. That we really don't know whether how things would have turned out had we not done these steps. So it's easy to say one thing and be frustrated, but it's easier to say that than actually be truthful.
Yeah, and listen, I understand everyone's frustrated. And I would say it's okay to be frustrated, but keep doing the things we talked about. Still social distance. If you're in an environment where you should wear a mask, put the mask on. It's not going to hurt anyone. And you can be frustrated and aggravated and still social distance and still do your part. And I think for the most part, even when you see people protesting for the most part on TV, they're kind of doing the right thing. And it's just, listen, it's easy for me to sit here. I haven't lost any pay, right? I'm working every day. But there's a lot of Americans, right, that lost their jobs and really a lot of people that are going to lose their livelihoods, their businesses they put so much into. You understand the frustration, and it's that fine line between doing the right thing and then getting back to business and getting your income going again. And I don't envy any of the leaders out there that are trying to navigate this. It's not a simple equation, but as I sit back, in my opinion, as I look at it, I think everyone's done a pretty good job. I mean, you can nitpick one way or the other, but we're going in the right direction, and I think that's the most important thing.
And like you're saying, Dave and I, we're both blessed, like you were referencing with your job situation, to still have that income coming in. I'm a teacher, and Dave works at a hospital, so yeah, we're definitely very fortunate. And then you just have to do your best to see someone else's perspective.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I just want to ask you. You see in the background there is Dowdy Ficklin Stadium. This is pretty much your view of Dowdy Ficklin, of the certainly the south side. Wanted to where the press box is, the Talmbank Tower as we know it now. I wanted to ask you as far as your thoughts on. Obviously, I feel like we're going to have a football season. My question to you is, do you feel like we're going to have where we're going to have like checkpoints, or we're going to have people temperatures? Do you think I feel like we should wear a mask, and if we have to go there a few hours, kind of like what we had to do after 9/11 for the airports, we had to go a few hours early. If that's what we have to do to see a college football game, I'm all for it.
I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but that's the $1 million question. So I have no inside knowledge whatsoever. I have been in close contact with my direct boss at ESPN, and he's been awesome. And they're kind of all in the same area we are. And people forget, like when companies got shut down and people got sent home, that's all the bosses at ESPN and all the people that are going to hopefully get the football season ready. But I agree with you. In my opinion, I think we are moving in the right direction. And if I was a betting man, we are going to have football. And I would even go further and say we're going to have football on time. But as you just hit, will there be fans or won't there be fans? If there is fans, how many fans will we have? And what will their checkpoints? Will there be mask and all that stuff? And then the other interesting thing is, as we've now seen it in our country, it's so diverse state to state, right? It's different state to state. Florida down here where I am, we're doing really well. Other states are not doing as good, but they're going in the right direction. The blessing that we all have as football fans, we probably have a good May to June, July. We have a good 60 days, 65 days, probably, maybe even 70 days to when I think football players would have to be back on campus to just start doing stuff. I think the deadline they gave, the consensus they came to is about 6 weeks before the first game, which is the last week in August. So we have time is on our side, I think, in the direction we're going. So my opinion, again, no inside knowledge whatsoever. It's just my humble opinion. We will have college football and we'll have it on time. What I am just don't know, and you just said, will there be fans or won't there? And I think that's the $1 million question.
Hey, along the lines of what you're saying, as far as fans, no fans, down in your neck of the woods, down to the south in Miami, did you see that proposal that the Dolphins put out there within the last week or two, as far as the way things could operate for them with fans, saying that it could be something like 15 or so thousand, and then they detailed the plan as far as where they would be seated and the distance between fans and all those sorts of things, traffic patterns going in and out of the stadium. And
so 15,000. So a normal day for the Dolphins is what you're saying, right?
Shots fired.
Yeah. Listen, but no, that's what these organizations have to do. And the colleges are doing it too. They're getting their, if you will, game plans together. And you have to have a plan A, B, C, and D. You have to have it all. You have to run the gamut. And that's what the states are going to want. They're going to want your plans from everything from not just security, but like you said, how you're going to drive in, your traffic patterns, your patterns in. Maybe you shut down, gates, right? But I think, as you said, Bubba, it all depends on how many fans are you going to allow in a game. And I made a joke, and hopefully I didn't offend any Dolphins fans. But at the college level, I mean, realistically, you could back off a lot of fans in a lot of stadiums, and really you're not going to hurt their fan base. And it is what it is. I mean, it's not a knock on the MAC. We do a lot of those MACtion games on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. I mean, there's hardly anyone in those stands. I mean, people just want to watch those games on TV. So it depends. I mean, if you limit the fans, obviously it's going to hurt the SECs, the ACCs, the Big 10, Big 12, all those conferences. But yeah, again, we're moving in the right direction. And I like that organizations like the Dolphins, and they're all doing it getting game plans together, and see what the data and the science says when they're ready to make those decisions.
Sneaking in on you here, Rennie. How you doing? Kyle, joining the podcast. Better late than never. Wife had dinner ready, and you know how that goes.
You got to eat. I hear you.
Yeah.
So, Rennie, well, let's talk about the Pirates. I want to get your thoughts. You saw year wonder to Mike Houston with unfortunately 4-8, but there were a couple of games there we let slip away. The Temple game, and you could also argue the SMU game as well.
Yeah.
There were two games there. We could easily have been a 500 team. We're that close to 6-6.
What about Cincinnati, Dave?
Cincinnati too, another one.
Yep. Listen, I'm going to use the cliche, and I've used it before, but it's truthful, and it really is truthful at ECU, and that's changing the culture, right? You hear coaches say it all the time, and Mike Houston. I was fortunate enough. I covered Mike Houston a good amount at JMU, so I know what kind of coach he is. I've covered him now at ECU. And again, and people say, well, what does changing the culture mean? Well, what it means is if you have a 9 a.m. meeting, you're not lollygagging, getting in your seat at 8:59 or 8:59:30. You're there at 8:45. You're ready to go. You do the little things right. And I think really for a few years, that's what ECU was missing. Just do the little things right, and everything else will take care of themselves. Listen, at the Division I level, at the big-time college football level, for the most part, you're going to get talent in there when you recruit, but they have to do the little things. You got to coach them up, and there's no doubt that Mike Houston is doing that. I know there was some, as you guys just talked about, some results that could have went the other way, but I think as a team, they are going to get exponentially better next year, and always in year 3, I think is the magic year.
Rennie, I don't know what's been talked about up here because I'm joining late. So if it's already been touched on, I apologize. But
we've been talking about you, Kyle.
We talked about me. Well, that's a hell of a topic.
We just transitioned to football, Kyle.
Okay. Well, at East Carolina, while we're dealing with a bit of a budget problem, projected $10 million loss this year, and coming up, we may cut some sports. A lot of other schools are going through it. Louisville cut a sport. Old Dominion. Furman announced today they were cutting baseball. I believe Bowling Green did the same thing last week. How I've seen it proposed that maybe some of the non-Olympic sports, some of these conferences, perhaps non-Olympic sports, non-revenue sports, Olympic sports, perhaps go to regional play, and then maybe just do conference tournaments for these spread out conferences like the American and Conference USA.
Yeah.
Do you think that's feasible?
I think it is. I mean, I heard that too. They've talked about it here in Florida as well, with all the Florida schools with the Olympic sports kind of doing regionalization. Listen, you're definitely going to save money, right? When you can just take a bus or a van to a venue a couple hours for your season, it helps out a lot, especially in a conference like the American where, you're pretty much on a plane all the time. So it definitely will save money. And with what we're going through, it's unprecedented. So the school presidents, the school athletic directors, they're putting their heads together. They are. And I've already seen in some conferences where they're shortening the seasons. They're shortening their conference championships if they're even having one at all. So it's an unfortunate situation for all those sports. But to answer your question, yeah, I think they can get together in a regionalization part of it. And another thing that I hadn't thought about, of course, I played at UMass, and they're an independent, a Division I independent, so they rely a lot on those money games, right? And ECU will play some money games as well, not to the extent that UMass. And so next year, this is really interesting. They had a game. Well, they have a game, if they still have it, scheduled at Auburn. I think in November. It's that the SEC, when they take kind of that week off in November before their rivalry game, UMass is set to get paid $1.9 million. It's the highest payout for an FBS team in history. That $1.9 million is going to help the UMass athletic department. I mean, they need it. I mean, it's budgeted in to help those sports that we were just talking about. If we don't have fans, guys, right, you're probably not going to have that game. You're probably not going to have that payout. So it's going to be fascinating what happens. And that's another kind of side story to what's going on with some of these teams that are looking for these payouts that need them from these big schools.
Rennie, Rennie, taking a look at the Pirates, and you were talking about the culture and how Mike Houston established that culture. 4-8, not what the Pirates wanted in 2019, but at the same time, those 4 wins, we took care of business against the teams that we should have beaten, and then we had those near misses that we've already referenced against Cincinnati and SMU, and then had a game like USF where we kind of stubbed our toe and was disappointing where we thought we could win. But taking a look at this ball club, I know you're very high on Holt Nailers, and then you have some very nice skill pieces on offense. You had 3 receivers coming back that are extremely proven, and Blake Prohl, C.J. Johnson, and Tyler Snead. So just talk about the Pirates on that side of the ball from what you know right now.
Sure, yeah. Skill, for the last couple of years, really, skill-wise, I don't think ECU has a problem whatsoever. They have the talent offensively and with their skill positions. All those players you just mentioned, wide receiver spots. They had a couple nice running backs as well. And I believe, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think I saw just maybe some transfers coming in, maybe some graduate transfers. And of course, Mike Houston knows the Carolinas really well. So he's going to recruit also. My thing, the last couple of years that I've seen with ECU, and listen, it's not rocket science. I say, if you see me or listen to me do any broadcast, I say it all the time. And I mean it wholeheartedly. I don't care what team you are. I don't care what level you are. You build your teams from the inside out. So you better start with your interior line play, both offensively and defense, and then build it out. They already have the pieces in place, I think, with their skill players, even defensively too. I think they got some skill. It's really in the trenches, and I think that's where they have to concentrate on their recruiting. And if they do that, and I think Holt Nailers is only going to get better as well. He was still a young quarterback last year, and it's not going to hurt them to go out and recruit and bring in some other quarterbacks. His competition is good at the college level, especially for the quarterback. But again, I think he has the ability to shore up those interior lines and make another step forward this year with the upcoming season.
Bubba, what is it with the grad transfer from App State at defensive end? And what is that, 10 defensive linemen we're bringing in with freshmen, JUCOs, and the grad transfer?
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say, Kyle. The numbers with the recruiting class certainly reflect those deficiencies that we've been discussing. And then you have you referenced the grad transfers, Rennie.
Yep.
You have grad transfers coming in, a couple of skill guys, Nigel Knott, defensive back out of Alabama, who's just a tremendous athlete and battled some injuries there. And then Chase Hayden, the running back from Arkansas. If Brett Belima and that program was bringing him in, the way they wanted to run the football, I really like what I saw of him on film, and he certainly produced when he had the opportunity and was one of their top 2 or 3 backs. And then the other 3 guys, like Kyle mentioned, Chris Willis of Appalachian, who battled an injury last year, and he was slated to start and had started the last half of the 2018 season. And then you have a couple of offensive linemen, one from NC State and then also one from North Carolina. And at least one of those will be immediately eligible. We're hoping Avery Jones, the one from North Carolina, who has 3 years left, we're hoping to get a waiver pass for him, with him being a local kid and everything that's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to Mike Houston and what he's done, because you see all those guys coming in. When you're at a Power 5 school, and this happens a lot, guys, where you're highly recruited, you go to a Power 5 school, and you just kind of get lost in the shuffle. I mean, you look around, you're like, holy cow, you're at an Alabama or an Arkansas, and you're like, everyone is talented here. And it's not that you're a bad player. It's just you just can't find your niche. So then you look to transfer, and you're going to most likely go to a Group of 5 school. So those kids that are at those Power 5 schools, they probably have a choice of 5, 10, 15, if not more, Group of 5 schools they can go to. So the fact that Mike Houston is getting some of those guys to come to ECU, that means a lot. And those are players, I think, that can step in and contribute right away, and you should see benefits. And again, you hope you get that waiver, as you were talking about, for the local young man. And so I think if you're an ECU fan, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your guys' broadcast, the future is bright. I think if they can just make that step and get a couple more wins, I know everyone would like them to go 10-2 and go to a great bowl game. But if they can just get a couple bowl games, I think realistically, guys, I think a realistic goal is try to get to that 6-win mark, right? Try to get to a bowl game, get some extra practices, and just get some juice back, right? Life in the program, and get the fans happy. And I think that's a realistic goal and something that they can achieve and shoot for.
Hey, Rennie, right now our goal is just to have practice. So
Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at the big picture, but you are 100% right.
Hey, Rennie, you're right. 6-6 would feel like 12-0 as bad as we've been.
oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and again, I tell you what, I've been doing ECU games probably since I'm trying to think the first time I've been up there, probably 2012, 2013, something in that range. I love that stadium. I'm not just saying it because I'm all with you guys. That I always tell people, to me, out of all the group of 5 places I go, when I go to Dowdy Flick, to me, let me preface it by saying when the crowds are good, because we know what happens. Listen, when you're losing and your program's down, people don't show up. I mean, that's not unique to ECU. That's everywhere. But when things are going and the energy is great and that crowd is pumping, then to me, it feels like an SEC stadium. It just really does. On a little smaller scale, but that's the vibe I get.
It's really
right. And about the crowds, Rennie, the little inside baseball, it wasn't just about losing. There's a lot of angry people about what happened with Ruff and McNeil that just haven't came back. And I think it's time for him to come back. I think the administration we have here now had nothing to do with what happened with Ruffin. And God knows Coach Houston and Ruffin are good friends. We had Ruffin on the podcast about 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So, I mean, it's time, if you're watching this in Pirate Nation, it's time to come back.
Get your season tickets, too, by the way, 1-800-ECU, ECUPirates.com. Rennie, as far as the ball games are concerned, let's talk about some other conferences, too. Who do you like early on, the early look at the different conferences off the cuff? Well, let's start with the American, since we're in the American with East Carolina. Hey, your neck of the woods, how is USF and UCF, the Florida schools, looking?
So USF, who I saw in person against ECU last year, I think they very similar in that I think they got a lot of skill pieces as well. And I think they need to kind of build from that inside out mentality as well. And the thing with the USF, you're in fertile recruiting ground. So you're always going to get the skill players in there, but you got to coach them up and you got to get that inside game going. But I think they will take another step up. I think they're going to be much better. I think UCF, once again, it will be one of the teams to beat in the conference. Very interesting. Mckenzie Milton, of course, we all saw the catastrophic injury he had a few years ago at USF. He's out throwing it's amazing. I mean, the kid almost lost his leg, but he's out throwing the ball. He's running on his leg. I mean, he wants to play. So that'll be an interesting story. But they're pretty much loaded again, I believe, as far as the American goes. So they'll be one to beat. Temple's another one that I like. I think Temple had a new coach last year, and I think they're kind of feeling their oats. Memphis will be interesting, right? Losing Mike Norvell. Memphis has always kind of been there. So they'll be interesting how they do, but they're still in the equation with a lot of talent. And then Houston is that one, right? I like to see what they're going to do their second year now under their new coach, moving in the right direction. So just a few, but again, way too early. I have no idea. I'm speaking off the cuff, but it is a great conference. It's one of my favorite conferences. I'm lucky I get to call the majority of my games in the American, and so I'm looking forward to it. God willing, we'll have another great American Conference season this year.
Yeah, and Cincinnati and SMU also bring a lot of talent back, and they'll be competing. I really, when you look at, in my opinion, looking at the conference on the East side, well, I guess there's not going to be divisions this year, but to me, the biggest question marks besides East Carolina, South Florida with a new head coach. I saw Vegas actually had them 101 odds to win the American. East Carolina and Tulsa were 50-1 odds. So Vegas not big on South Florida this year. Tulsa showed a lot of improvement last year and have a good number of pieces coming back. And Coach Montgomery, Philip Montgomery down at Tulsa, he's going to be coaching for his job this year. And that's going to be really interesting. Tulsa, they were way better last year than their record indicated. They were a good football team, the best 4-win football team in college football, or 5 wins, whatever they were. And they wouldn't surprise me this year if they didn't compete for the West. Well, again, I keep wanting to say the West Division, but
for the American, we'll say. Yeah, listen, I agree with you. Philip Montgomery is a very good coach, and for people that don't remember, when he first got to Tulsa, I think he went 10-3, and he won 10 wins one year, 9 wins another year. So a lot of wins right away. showing that he could coach up the players that he had. And then they went into just, as you kind of talk about, just into a lull. Haven't done well. Last year started to turn it around, was a better team. But I agree with you. He's probably coaching for his job this year. And just, for those that haven't been to Tulsa, it's a beautiful place. Another tiny stadium, but a beautiful campus. What people probably don't know, it's, I think, the smallest FBS campus in the country. I think it's like 2,400 students. It's small. Yeah. It's a very good educational school. So it's hard to recruit there. And I think that is what he has found out the last few years there. It's tough to get players in there, but he's doing the best job he can. But I agree with you. I think this is a big year for him and that program, and for him in particular to keep that job.
You were talking
Another
about Mike.
Program that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on is Houston Cougars. Obviously, Dana Holgorsen and everything that went on there in year one. De'Aaron King making the decision to hang it up after 4 games. And we knew he wasn't going to be back, and he obviously left for Miami. They only won 4 ball games, and they're paying Dana Holgorsen $4 million. So what do you think about the Cougars in year 2 of Holgorsen?
And last year, I've said this multiple times, I don't think there was enough publicity about the American and Houston getting a Power 5 coach like Dana Holgorsen. I thought that was a big deal. We, the American, and you guys see it, we're always losing coaches, right? They're always going the other direction. So the fact that they got a Power 5 coach from a Big 12 school, I thought was a big deal that didn't get enough recognition. Now, he went in there. You want to talk about changing a culture, right? He's going to do things his way. He's been around a long time. And to be honest with you guys, I don't think De'Aaron King fit his system. So I don't think listen, he's a great talent. But for what he wants at quarterback, and this is just my opinion, I don't think De'Aaron really fit what he wants to do, the directions he's going to go. So I don't think it was I don't want to say it's a huge loss, but I think he's okay with it going another direction. I think he's happy for De'Aaron that he's able to transfer and try to better himself at another program like Miami. So, yeah, but that is a fascinating place because he's got some talent down there as well. So I will be very eager to see what he does as well.
And who are we leaving out, guys? And they always get left out.
Well,
and
Cincinnati.
They end up
you mentioned Cincinnati.
Well, Cincy, we didn't talk about Cincy, but
I know who you're talking about, Kyle.
Yeah, all they ever do is blow us out and win 9 or 10 games every year. The Navy midshipmen.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, listen, when you run an offense like they do, right, and you run that triple option, it's just I don't care how many times you've seen it in conference. You're not preparing for it, and it's just it comes up in the middle of the season, and you're trying to adjust. And they run it like a smooth engine. And they got, want to talk about players with a chip on their shoulders. Remember, these guys are going to college really to graduate and go protect our nation, right? Protect our interests. None of those guys are thinking about going pro. So every one of them has a chip on their shoulder. They're all a little smaller. They're all a little undersized, but they all play their butts off. They do their jobs as 11 players. And Ken Niumatalolo is a good coach that has opportunities to leave multiple times, who stayed. He's the longest tenured coach in the American, and he just keeps it rolling, and they got a new defensive coordinator last year, and that defense did play better. So you're right. But they're just, other than I think it was 2 years ago, guys, right? They only won 3 games, which was like crazy. Like you never see that out of Navy, but they bounced right back the next year, and you knew they would.
Yeah, and Navy's new defensive coordinator, his successor is our new defensive coordinator. So the guy that took over for what school was it, guys?
Kennesaw State.
Kennesaw State. I guess it's just Kennesaw now. I think they dropped the state.
Yeah, the guy who took over for him is Mike Houston's new defensive coordinator. So maybe we'll have similar success because Navy's defense was very good last year.
Very good. And again, and what we just talked about, we're not talking about studs everywhere, but some players that they understand their assignments. And they got a linebacker this year that they believe next year maybe the first Navy linebacker drafted, I think, ever. So they got some players, no doubt.
And that's what I was going to say, Dave, like Kyle was saying, with Blake Harrell coming in, that had to be it's one of those things. It's probably it was a tough decision, but at the same time, an easy decision in a sense to part ways with his mentor or one of his mentors in Bob Trott to bring in Blake Harrell.
And listen, change is good, right? And Bob Trott, tremendous coach. I mean, he's forgot more about football than the four of us know combined. But he understands too, Bob Trott does, that it's a business. And Mike Houston understands that too. And you got to get the right coaches in, just like the right players. And so for him to make a change like that at defensive coordinator, I think it's going to pay dividends. There's no doubt about it. Now, the $1 million question is, and Dave talked about it a couple times here, you got to get the players in, right? You got to get the players in to work with them, to learn new systems and get ready to go. So I will say this, as far as learning new systems, much easier to put a defense in as it is to put an offense in a short time. So defense is usually easier to do. And
I'm sure it was talked about, Rene. If somebody put a gun to your head, well, I shouldn't say you're a cop. You shouldn't use that analogy.
Well, maybe you should use gun. Maybe it is appropriate.
If somebody put a gun to your head and said, "What's the start date going to be for college football this year in terms of playing, not practicing?" What would you?
I think we start on time. I really do. I think, and you guys may have a schedule in front of me. I have nothing in front of me. I think August 29th, there's a slate of games.
We're week 0 game. East Carolina Marshall.
Week 0. So I think we have games. I think everyone talked about a 6-week start to be able to go. So what's that put us in, guys, for that mid-July?
Yeah.
I think we will get in training camps by mid-July for those schools, and they'll fall into place. I think you're going to have kids on campus in June. I really do. I have no inside knowledge. This is my opinion based on what I've seen, kind of what I'm looking at in the landscape. The $1 million question is, Kyle, will we have fans or not? That's really what I believe. I believe we will have football. It'll be on TV. Will we have fans or not? And if we do have fans, how many will we have? That's, to me, the $1 million question.
That's kind of what I think, too. I hope you're right about starting on time. I kind of thought maybe it may get pushed back to the end of September, but I hope you're right.
And it may well. I think we would all agree the most important thing is let's just have football,
Yeah. And I think maybe I came in and Bubba was talking about it, diminished capacity. 50,000 seat Dowdy Ficklin. Maybe you make the you say 15 or 20,000 and you distance 6 feet apart unless you rob together. I could envision where, they got these infrared thermometers that you can just put in front of somebody's head. Maybe we take temperatures going in the stadium.
I think they should make. I was going to say, I think they should make Kyle sit out in the truck the whole game.
I just wouldn't come.
But no, Kyle, you're right. I mean, much like they're doing with restaurants now, right? We see like here in Florida, you can have 50% capacity, and then you got to hit thresholds. I can definitely see it, and that's something they've talked about. I mean, I said earlier, I don't know if you were on the call, I'm in constant contact with my bosses at ESPN, and the smart people that run these companies, they have plans A, B, C, D, and E, and probably F and G. I mean, they have them all, and you have to be ready, right? Because as we move, what we're learning is we're learning new things daily, weekly, monthly, right? So as we get closer, what do the doctors tell us? What does the science tell us? And that's really what's going to dictate where we go. But right now, what I see nationwide, and I think California, their governor, Gavin Newsom, just mentioned today that he is going to allow pro sports to start June 1. So that is a huge reversal in the state of California. Huge reversal from what he was saying a week ago. So we are learning, every day things are changing. So I think we're in a good position as long as we keep heading in this direction, right? I mean, obviously something unforeseen could happen, God forbid, and so that could change the course. But in the direction we're going now in this country, that's what gives me hope and optimism that we will have football and on time.
How happy were your colleagues at ESPN to have at least NASCAR and UFC back the last 2 weekends?
Well, and just by looking at Twitter, right, seeing people's response, it's like, The Last Dance was great, and we loved it. I think we all needed that. We needed that fresh content. And it was funny. I tweeted out last night. It was like, okay, 10 episodes, 5 weeks. It ended last night. I almost feel like, okay, the key should be turned, and now the country should open because that's over. What are we waiting for now? But the good news is, we had the driving relief for golf. I'm a big golf fan, so I watched it. It's just great seeing people compete live. And, of course, NASCAR out there going. And then next week, guys, we're going to have Mickelson, Woods, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady. So that's going to be phenomenal. And little by little, UFC's getting out there. And because those are the questions, too, because I think what people need to to figure out too is when we get football back and we have 120 kids, right, on a college team, I think it's safe to say inevitably someone is going to get coronavirus. I think we can say that. Guys, it's a virus. It's a respiratory virus, right? What we did by social distancing and staying at home, we flattened the curve. It's a virus. I'm not a doctor. I have slept in a Holiday Inn before, but it's a virus from everything I've read, and looked at. So I think it's naive to think that people aren't going to get it. But now with the science and what we know, it's how do we deal with it? I think 2 months ago, if you were on a team and you had coronavirus, they would have shut the whole team down. They would have quarantined 100 people. And now I think if someone gets it, that person's going to go through different tests and that person's going to be quarantined. But I think the team can be tested safely and we can go on with a season. And I think we've seen that. I think Dana White showed that with UFC because what happened? We had some fighters test, right? I think the night before they pulled them out and said, you're not fighting. But the event went on without a hiccup. So I think we can learn from other sports. And so that's a good thing, not overreacting, because I think the overreaction in the sports world could really, really hurt us.
No question about that. Speaking of money, we're talking about big money. I mentioned before this $2 million is the latest word I heard as far as how much Greenville would lose. That's how much we get every home game. And obviously we're losing some of it because people aren't going to restaurants and bars
Sure.
and things already because we had 3 years of Scotty Montgomery. A little bit back yet last year with Mike Houston. But, we're looking at 5 straight losing seasons. So people depend on the Pirates to win, just like any other college town for that local team, fill in the blank. And for us, $2 million is a lot of money in the local economy.
Well, not only that, you guys already touched on it. Look at what's happening to all the Olympic sports, right, at these other programs. You feel horrible for these players. And I have two daughters. They're both in high school. They're both play soccer, and they both aspire to play Division I soccer. And just so you know, too, people are going to say, oh, it's just crazy. My one daughter, who's going to be a senior next year, is getting recruited by ECU. So that's the school she's looked at. So, but that's women's soccer, right? So that's one of the sports that kind of looks to kind of be on a chopping block in some places. Now, thankfully for Title IX, for women's sports, they get a little bit more protected than we're seeing what's happening with some men's sports in some places. But you don't want to see any sports get cut in any of these schools. But unfortunately, that's a byproduct of what's happening with the coronavirus because of what you mentioned, Dave, right? They know they're not going to have the revenue and season tickets and people coming. And then, guys, what else is happening is enrollments are going to be down, right? Kids aren't sure if they're going to enroll. Are we going to have a fall semester? What am I going to do? And a lot of these schools have fees built in, right? They go to those Olympic sports that they're not having anymore. So it's a tough situation all the way around.
Looks like what we're going to have to do, guys, and we'll get back to football real quick. It looks like what we're going to have to do, Rene, I'm worried not only about, you think about with small businesses, you look at, even hospitals, there's all kinds of things. But if you look at particular for universities, if you don't have those students there, like you were talking about, I worry about our school being East Carolina or fill in the blank again, whatever school, because academically, you've got to have those kids on campus to have the meal plans. You've got all kinds of, you're talking about the fees, you have even parking stickers, or at one point, I know when I was there was $100 a year. I don't even know what it is now, but that's non-refundable. So there's a lot of things like that we're not even thinking about, fees that if they're not there, then the money's not coming in. And we even have a ECU student suing the university system for not getting what they think is a fair or great education, because they can't be, in other words, it's more than just distance learning.
Yeah, well, and there's no doubt about it. And I think that's the big thing. So you're starting to see now when you read online and different schools are actually upping their start date for the fall semester. You see a bunch of schools now are going to go into class on campus in like mid-August, and they're going to get out before Thanksgiving. They're going to end the term before Thanksgiving, and then they're off again until the springtime, which I think is why. So you see schools are starting to think outside of the box, because we know with a respiratory virus, right, the summertime inherently is better. So I think a lot of these schools are thinking, okay, we're going to put kids back on campus because it's the best environment for them to learn what is the safest and best thing to do. Hey, let's start a month early. We'll get out a month earlier, and we'll come back in the spring semester. So I like the fact that these schools are thinking outside of the box. And I want to say, I read online, every school in the SEC has said they will have a fall semester with their students on campus. I want to say the state of Mississippi is the only one. So we got Mississippi State that hasn't committed to it yet. But as we see, a lot of schools are committing. And I think they have to make that commitment because of what we talked about, right? Because kids want to enroll, kids want to go. And so let's say, for instance, you want to go to ECU, but you say, I want to go to campus. I don't want to distance learn, but I want to go to ECU. And if ECU says, well, I'm going to have online, and then maybe that person got into North Carolina State, let's say, and that North Carolina State says, well, we're going to have campus, and they're going to go there, right? And I'm just making an example there. So I think that's what these schools are trying to do, jockey themselves in a good position for the students and for their student body, and to get kids in there.
And you mentioned Mississippi. I have a buddy that's down in Mississippi, Southern Miss guy, and the reason Mississippi hasn't announced it yet, they're in a bad situation, man. They New Orleans, if you know the proximity to Mississippi, New Orleans.
Sure.
A lot of people left New Orleans when they had their bad problem with outbreak and hit it north of Mississippi, and their governor was one of the last to put things on lockdown. And yeah, things aren't good in Mississippi right now.
Yeah. So I mean, and the good thing with the medical out there now, they can concentrate. They can go find out where their issue is, try to concentrate and harness it, and try to get better. And that's the best thing they can do. And we'll wait and see. And you know, like you guys, we pray for the state of Mississippi. We pray for the entire country that we can all get through this. And obviously we're talking about football, which is our love, but obviously a lot of lives were lost, and our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone. And it's unprecedented in our history, I think, in every aspect, right? In the economy, again, in life's lost and people sick, and just it's just crazy times for sure.
Rene, in addition to the Pirates and the American, I know last year you had the opportunity to call at least one App State game up in Boone at the Rock. And so that program's been so consistent, going back to the days of Jerry Moore and then Scott Satterfield, everything he did. Eli Drinkwitz comes in and has that one awesome year, wins 30 ball games on to Missouri for him. But Sean Clark, I really like that hire. I've watched several interviews with him, and he just really, I mean, one, he lived it as a player, and then he lived it again as a coach, and just you can tell. I think it's an awesome marriage, kind of like Russell McNeil was for East Carolina.
I agree, and I think he understands the culture of App State, and that's for anyone that hasn't been there. I think that's a bucket list type place to get up there. I mean, it's a beautiful drive up there, and that stadium on the Rock, as you talk about, that's a team too. A lot of talent now. App State fans, I probably shouldn't say this because they're going to hate me after I say this, but I did a game there. I did Jerry Moore's last game there. It was a playoff game. They lost. And, of course, the game that you just mentioned, I did the Georgia Southern game on Halloween night this past season. And, of course, they lost that game. So they're going to hate me. They're not going to want me back up there. But I don't blame me. I blame Mike Corey, my play-by-play partner. It's all his fault, not my fault. But, no, it's a great program. I love that environment. We talk about a culture. That's a culture that knows how to win there. They bring coaches in, they kind of reload and get going. So yeah, that's a great hire, and I'm looking forward to seeing them play again this year.
Have you had a chance to eat at the Daniel Boone Inn?
I have. As a matter of fact, we went the last time we were up there, and I think that game. I tried to diet last year because when traveling, it's so hard, guys. I mean, you just eat. I don't want to say eat bad because you eat good, but you eat bad. And I always gain weight, so I've been trying to make a concerted effort to kind of tamp it down. But when you go to Boone, North Carolina, you got to go to Daniel Boone, and you just can't miss it. So yes, I have been there a few times.
But I was going to say also, as far as Appalachian's concerned, looking at their schedule this year, they have a trip to Wisconsin and then also Wake Forest, a great interstate rivalry that unfortunately hasn't taken place that much since the late 90s, early 2000s. So just talk about them from the standpoint they have a veteran quarterback coming back, tremendous running game, and ironically, they have East Carolina's former offensive coordinator from the Scotty Montgomery area, Tony Peterson, there now. So it'll be interesting to see their commitment and how they continue to run the football with the loss of Darrington Evans. But they have a tremendous stable of backs and then some nice guys out wide as well. So just talk about them and the way they've become kind of the Boise State of the Sun Belt, the way they've dominated that conference.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that Appalachian State is a team, is a program that can really dominate their conference, that Sun Belt Conference, year in and year out. There's no doubt about it. I love the fact, and you mentioned it, when the group of 5 teams like the Appalachian States, like the East Carolinas, when they get a chance and they go out there and they schedule the quote unquote Power 5 teams, because if you ask a group of 5 school, they'll never call them Power 5. They like to call them the Autonomous 5. But I love when they go play those schools because, you suit up. There's only 11 guys versus 11 guys at once, and you try to play those teams. And so a school like App State, that's how you become, right, the quote-unquote Boise State that we talked about. I mean, that put Boise State on the map, and I think that's the best way to do it. Go out there and play them. And you mentioned the personnel that App State has. You bring in a new coach and a few new assistant coaches, and so we know the talent's there. Now you just got to keep them moving in the right direction with that coaching staff, and I think they'll do that. I think it's the right hire, and so I'm looking forward to this season to see them keep climbing. But there's no doubt they will be in it to win the Sun Belt each and every year.
No question about it. In fact, Appalachian State, I think, Bubba, is that your favorite school?
I'm beginning to wonder there, Dave.
We give Bubba, that's an inside joke for people wondering. East Carolina's his favorite school. We like to give him a hard time about that. One of his best friends is a baseball coach there at Appalachian State, so he knows more than probably he should. But Boone is my freshman year of college, I was at Lee's McRae and transferred in my sophomore year to East Carolina. Boone is beautiful, love it, and hopefully I can get back there this summer. A great place to visit, and it's actually a great place to live. A lot of great people up there.
Sure is, yeah. Yeah, that's another one I love going to as well.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Are there any places that you don't like to go? Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, listen, the funny thing is I am a football junkie. I really am. I mean, and I think that's why my bosses like me. If they give me a Division III game in, Minnesota, I'm going. And so I just love to call football. Let me think off the top of my head. I mean, I'll tell you, I think I will say this about Appalachian State. It's tough to get to. Right, I fly into Charlotte and then you got to drive, and I don't mind those drives, but they can be tough. Sun Belt schools can be tough to get to, but really, I don't mind going anywhere. There's some MAC schools. The MACtion, let's face it, it can be tough. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. There's not many fans there. Tough places to get to. Weather's bad. But again, I'm just happy to be calling college football, so I will go anywhere. But there is nothing like going to a sold-out Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium or going to UCF that has 45 or 50,000. Going to like I did a Florida game this year. I mean, you go into the SEC and you go to a place like the Swamp, and I think the game we had, I think they had 78,000, and people were like, oh, they didn't sell out. I'm thinking this is pretty dang good. You know what I mean? So that's that excitement, and that's what I hope we don't lose this year, right? With what's going on, but we will have to wait and see. That's part of college football, the pageantry that I love when I travel the country.
Rene,
what is the worst Power 5 atmosphere? I would imagine Duke and Wake Forest here in our state would be right on the list. Maybe Illinois recently.
And it's funny. So you mentioned all 3 of those schools. I've done games at all 3 of those schools. Not recently. I did Duke Pitt a few years ago with Jason Benetti. And the atmosphere, it was a Saturday afternoon. It was okay. It wasn't great. I did a Wake Forest Virginia Tech game, believe it or not, about 7 or 8 years ago. And Wake Forest, I think, was 6-2, and I think Vatech was 6-1. So that atmosphere was actually pretty good back then. And then Illinois, it was iffy. So yeah, I mean, the schools like that. And listen, guys, we've talked about it. Even at those places, I think if you're winning and you're winning at a good level, I think you'll get the fans out. I think those places, when you don't win, it's exacerbated, right? Fans not showing up. So there's more of an emphasis on those schools winning, I think, than anyone else, and that goes pretty much for all the many of the Group of 5 schools.
Hey, Rennie. Yeah, we got some viewer questions here. Carl DeFranco says, "Hey, Rennie, what about Wake?"
So, and so in full disclosure, I don't know much about Wake. I haven't done much study on them at all. I know Dave Clawson's a very good coach. He has them going in the right direction. It's a program, I think, again, ACC, listen, I think the ACC on a whole was down, right? I think we can all agree on that. I mean, Clemson just far and away better than everybody. So I think the rest of the conference, it's kind of wide open. And Wake's one of those schools that's in there that's going in the right direction. So I am interested to see what Dave Clawson does, but I can't sit here today and give you any specifics other than they're in it in the ACC to kind of compete with many of those schools.
I'm interested to see what Satterfield does at year 2 at Louisville. I bet they'll be pretty good pretty fast.
Yeah, again, another really good coach that I think did better, right, that first year out than I think people thought he would do there. It's a school that I think is very supportive of their football program. Great stadium. I have called a game there. I saw Lamar Jackson in person there against Virginia, and the guy in person is everything you thought and think he was going to be and better. So I have that feather in my cap that I got to see him in college, but a great stadium. They've added on, and in a lot of those programs where people think of them first and foremost as basketball schools, it's nice to see them get behind football. Like I like to tell people all the time, football and basketball make the majority of the money for these programs, but make no mistake about it. Basketball's on the bus, but football's driving the bus. I always tell people that, so don't forget it.
Got it.
And in Louisville, former East Carolina player is co-office coordinator for Satterfield at Louisville. Dwayne Ledford, his co-OC. So keep an eye on that, Pirate Nation.
And Bubba, I know we got another question from Johnny Gardner.
Yeah, I was going to get to that in just a moment, but as far as Louisville, we've used that word culture numerous times in this broadcast and just talked about what Mike Houston is doing with the culture at East Carolina. And I think it's a different type of culture situation at Louisville with Coach Satterfield having taken over for Coach Petrino. But I've heard that was a tremendous culture overhaul there.
Yeah, I could imagine, no doubt about it. Yeah, and the game I did, Bobby Petrino, and I tell people always ask me about coaches, and listen, I can only react to how coaches treat me and how I interact with them in meetings. And Bobby Petrino was great with me. But yeah, I mean, the culture is night and day. And again, I think a lot of these programs, that's really what they need. They need a jumpstart going kind of in another direction because they can just kind of get complacent, right? And you bring in a new head coach that brings in his mindset, his frame of mind, what he wants to do. And then, let's make no mistake about it, guys. It's about recruiting. You need to get players in there. Once you get the right players in there and coach them up, you're going to win in those places. You're just going to. I mean, look what Alabama does. Look what Nick Saban does. I mean, for years, they've kind of evolved, right, with the times in terms of the spread offense and spreading out. But at the end of the day, Nick Saban plays dominant defense and he runs the football. That's what he always did. I mean, I don't care what kind of offense you run, spread, you can call it whatever you want. At the end of the day, you better play dominant defense and you need to run the ball at the end of the games to win, to put teams away. I'm old school. People could disagree with me, but you need to do that. Even a spread offense will tell you we will run the ball first. And then spread it out, and you need to run to close games out. I tell people all the time, you throw the ball to score points, but you run the ball to win football games. And for years, that's what Alabama has done, and they just keep reloading, right? It's almost like it's not fair to them. In Clemson, you see these teams in there, but you're starting to see some parity out there. There's a lot of good players out there. When you travel this nation, and now we see so many high school games on TV. It's a matter of recruiting, and I think Satterfield at Louisville, he's set up in a really, really good position.
Johnny Gardner asked, one of our favorites, have you ever called a Mount Union game?
Unbelievable. I have. Now, I didn't do a home game, but I did their national championship game 3 or 4 years ago. So the Amos Alonzo Stag Bowl, I did, and they won that game. So that you want to talk about a dominant program. I don't know how many people out there know about Mount Union, but it's one of the most dominant football programs, regardless of division. They're a Division III school, and it's crazy when you talk about Mount Union guys because they will get kids in Ohio, okay, that get full offers to go to MAC schools, and they will turn those scholarships down to go to Mount Union because they feel like they're going to play for a national championship, and they do. And so when I did that game, and I talked to a lot of those players. Multiple players told me, yeah, I had a chance to get a scholarship to go to this school, and not just the MAC. I'm not trying to hit on the MAC, but that's in the vicinity where Mount Union is in Ohio. And as Johnny's talking about, a great atmosphere. It's just a great program. It doesn't matter. You insert coaches there, and they got great talent. And listen, players have made it to the pros from Mount Union. So it's that old adage, they'll find you where you play. So, and listen, as a former player, it's an interesting discussion, right? Would you rather go to a Division I school that maybe isn't doing as well, and then you're going to fight for 3-4 years to try to maybe get to a bowl game or maybe a conference championship? Or do you go to a Division III school that you say, this is a dominant school, and not only are we going to win our conference championship, we are going to compete for a national championship each and every year? Because, guys, at the end of the day, I'm going to be 48 on Saturday. All as we have as players is memories, okay? So, it's an interesting thought. What are those memories? What are they going to be? So, and you get a national championship ring, I don't care what division it's at. You have that thing forever. So that's an interesting stuff. But that was a great question because great program, Mount Union.
Hey, Rene, as far as the MAC is concerned, you probably would want to go to Fort Union now even more with the news coming out of the MAC last week. Very disappointing to see for the conference.
Yeah, what would rehash it for me? What exactly did they say last week? Because so much information has been flying fast and furious.
Well, it didn't affect football, but they're making some changes. You alluded to it earlier about certain conferences, so they're one of them that are going to eliminate conference tournaments.
Yeah,
shrink the basketball tournament to 8 teams. Play more conference baseball games. Just changes like that. Really, I don't really think there was anything that affected football that I saw.
Yeah, no, and I do recall. As you said, it shortened the schedules too. I know the Atlantic 10, who UMass plays in all their other sports than football. What they've done as a conference, I mean, I think they've eliminated probably 20-25% of the games for those college or for those Olympic sports. So you're saying if you play a 16 game soccer season, you're talking about you're only going to play 12 games now. You're going to get cut substantially. And I think they eliminated conference championships as well. So yeah, a lot going on. And you feel horrible for those athletes because make no mistake about it. We're talking about football here and I'm a football analyst. Those athletes deserve as much as anybody else. They train as hard as any other sport. They put as much into it. And your heart goes out for all those players and everything that's going to get cut back. And we haven't even talked about what the virus did to the spring sports right before. All those schools, all those seasons got canceled, right? So you were a senior, and I know they said some can come back, but it's just it's devastated. This virus and what's happened has besides the obvious that we talked about, the death and the sickness, which is in a level on its own. But as far as everything else in the sports world and just the school world, it has really devastated so many different people that couldn't graduate, couldn't go to prom in high school, can't finish their sports. All my kids, as I said, both my daughters play club soccer here in Florida. I mean, the club season's just like a switch got shut right off. But I mean, we're starting to get emails though. I believe my daughters will start back up with their club soccer probably within the next couple of weeks. They've put a plan into the state, and they have a plan of how they're going to run practices, how many, and so forth. So that's great news. 1, to get back playing sports, and 2, to get my daughters the heck out of my house because they're driving me bonkers.
Oh, could they say the same thing about you, Rene?
Well, I go to work every day, so they can't.
Okay.
What they say when I come home is, Dad, you didn't do anything at work. I'm like, no, yeah, I did do something at work every day. So, but they need – listen, I'm trying to kickstart them in the butt because, as I told you, they both told me they want to play Division I soccer. So I'm trying to tell them what that entails, what you have to do to be a Division I athlete. They don't want to listen to Dad. I'm trying to spur them along, but eventually – what's the old adage? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. They're gonna have to do it on their own. So we'll see if they fulfill their dreams. But as a dad, I'm proud. I just love kind of getting involved in this whole thing, and that's why it was cool to me when my daughter said, "Hey, ECU, Dad, is one of the schools that I would like to play at if possible." So I know she's kind of been in contact with them, and she's a junior, so she's kind of right in the thick of the recruiting process. So it'll be interesting.
What about early happy birthday to you?
Jason Hamilton, the head women's coach, on the show.
Yeah, get them on, and the good thing is there's a girl from her club. If people don't know that are listening, college soccer, they don't recruit. The colleges don't recruit high schools; they recruit the clubs. I mean, that's where they play, and you play at the ECNL level, and that's where they recruit. So my daughter's club team has a girl on the roster at ECU. So there's always those little connections, I think, is how they get hooked up in the recruiting world. So it's interesting as a father sitting back, kind of watching the recruiting process. I often say, God, I think, kind of blessed me with two daughters, kind of blessed me and cursed me at the same time. I'm not in the football world. I can do my broadcasting and sit back, and as I'm a soccer dad, I kind of sit back and watch and see where that process goes. So it's interesting.
And when boys come to date your daughter, are you ESPN personality Rene Ingoglia, or are you Detective Rene Ingoglia? So
it's interesting. I'm both. I mean, they all know I'm a police officer, but they think it's cool I work for ESPN. So I kind of have the best of both worlds. I'm a nice guy. They come over here. I have property in Orlando. I have about 5 acres, so there's always kids here throwing footballs around. I try to get out and throw it with them. But they're always here, messing around on the property. So, but they're good. They're good kids.
There's that old country song, Rene Ingoglia, about cleaning your gun. Rodney Atkins. I can see you like you're at home cleaning the gun when they're out on a date.
Yeah, inherently, I think they know I'm a cop, so I think we're good there. I think it's my daughters I got to worry about. Those are the ones that are driving me nuts. That I try to instill a little discipline in them. I have a freshman and a junior, and they both drive me nuts. My 17-year-old got in a car accident the other. I probably shouldn't say this. My insurance company's probably listening, but you guys will love this story. She rear-ended a boat. How do you rear-end a boat? A guy trailering a boat, and it was a very expensive boat. So I wasn't happy to say the least, but no one was hurt.
Night?
No one was hurt, so that's the main thing.
Was it night?
No, it wasn't at night. The boat pulled up to a stop sign, and she, being, a new driver, she said, Dad, he started to go. And what he probably did, because he was trailering a very expensive, very big boat, he probably crept up through the stop sign. She thought he was going to go. She started to go. He didn't go. And she hit a very, 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 very expensive outboard engine. And we'll leave it at that. That's why we have insurance, though. That's why we have insurance.
More ESPN games.
Can laugh about it now.
You're going to have to do more ESPN games, right?
Well, I told my boss jokingly, but I was like, boy, we have to have football because I can't afford my insurance premiums. If I told you guys what my premiums were, you would all three fall out of your chair. So I'm not even going to mention what they are.
I can only imagine.
I'm not even going to mention.
Wow.
Brittany, I had one more football-related question for you. Backtrailing to the ACC, I wanted to ask you then. You played at UMass, so kind of your neck of the woods when you were a player. Boston College kind of surprised me when they fired Steve Adazio last year. I thought he was a solid coach, maybe stuck at that kind of 6-7 win total, but I think he's a solid coach. But then it almost surprised me just as much that he immediately got hired at Colorado State. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that situation.
Steve Adazio is a good coach. His defensive coordinator for a long time was a guy by the name of Jim Reed, who was my first coach at UMass, who has coached, at Iowa, coached at the Miami Dolphins, kind of coached everywhere. And it's funny, we just talked to him on a Zoom call. Good coach, and Steve Adazio that got a job. Listen, I think a lot of programs, and we I think we kind of touched on this. It's kind of that curse, right, with athletic departments and fan bases where, if you win 6, 7, 8 games, it's not enough for programs, right? They want 10, 11 wins. And it's like, boy, sometimes you just have kind of got to understand where your program is. And I understand the frustration. But what I'd say is, as I travel and see different programs and call different games, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's tough in a lot of these power conferences. And I think Boston College and I think Syracuse both kind of, when they left and came to the ACC, I don't think it's gone as smoothly in a whole as they would like it to. But again, we talked about it. I think the ACC last year in totality was down. I think Mike Oresco said this multiple times. He said it to me in private, but I think he has said it publicly as well. If you would have taken UConn off their games right off last year and didn't count them in for the American, I think their strength rating, the Americans, was higher than the ACC's last year. So I mean,
Clemson, you just took Clemson away from the ACC.
Even worse.
Take Clemson out of the equation. ACC versus the American head-to-head. I tell you what, I'd like our chances.
Yeah, and I would agree with you too. And I think the ACC needs to step up. I did Pitt last year in their bowl game, which was an exciting game at Ford Field. They beat Eastern Michigan at the end. But that's another team there that needs to, kind of up the ante. You can't be, you get to a bowl game, you want to beat a MAC school, by a lot. You don't want to win at the end. Win's a win, but, you got to set your –
You just mentioned my favorite coach in college football, Chris Creighton.
Yeah. You want to talk about energy and a culture. He does a nice job there. Another tough place to recruit. How the heck do you recruit there? But he's been able to turn that program around. That's a guy there that I think, Chris Creighton, I don't see Eastern Michigan keeping him. He's one that's going to be mentioned, and he's going to be off to another job, unfortunately, for Eastern Michigan.
Yep.
And Rennie, very quickly before I get to our final question for you, Mike Radford chimes in. He had 2 sons that played at Richmond.
Yeah, there you go.
Jim Reed was the coach there for one of them, and then of course Mike London after that.
Yep.
But so just talk about as far. Did you know Coach Reed?
I do know Coach Reed. So my backstory quickly, guys. I got recruited in 1989-90, really high in high school. I was a top running back. I basically, and this was back before they gave offers out, 9th, 10th grade, crazy stuff. But I basically had offers from Wisconsin, Syracuse, Boston College. Those 3 were kind of what I was narrowing it down to. And that's when Syracuse was a national power. Boston College was much better. And Wisconsin, Barry Alvarez had just taken over. I blew my knee out my senior year, lost all my scholarship offers. I'll never forget it. I tell people this story all the time. I was an 18-year-old, just turned 18-year-old senior, and I'll never forget it. The coach for the University of Wisconsin, a guy by Barry Wyatt, he came to me and he said, and this is a school that basically offered me a scholarship. They said, it's like you go to a dealership to buy a new car. You go to that dealership and you see the car you want, you pick out the car and you say, there's the car I'm going to buy. Well, you go back a month later to buy that car and there's a dent in it. Well, you don't care how the dent got there. There's a dent in it. You're going to buy the next best car that's sitting right next to it. And that's the way recruiting is. So I didn't get a scholarship. They took the next best running mate that they wanted. So I didn't have any scholarships, but Jim Reed and UMass was the only school that gave me a full ride. Jim Reed used to coach under Dick McPherson, the late great coach at Syracuse. It's in the College Football Hall of Fame, of course, coach with the New England Patriots. Jim Reed was a protege under Dick McPherson, and Dick McPherson called him and said, give this kid a scholarship because they recruited me at Syracuse. So I got to play for Jim Reed for a year. Unfortunately, he left UMass before I could actually play for him. But I can tell you this, Jim Reed, without a doubt, out of every coach I have ever been associated with, high school, college, or pro, has more integrity than any coach I've ever dealt with. He is a great man. I can't get into it. We don't have enough time. He single-handedly saved the UMass program for some things he did in the early 90s. A great, great coach. Went on, was a head coach at Richmond, VMI, defensive coordinator, I said, at BC, at Iowa, was with the Miami Dolphins. but a great man. And I got to talk to him 2 weeks ago on Zoom. He's not coaching anymore because, as I said, he was with Adazio, didn't go out to Colorado State. He's living in the Boston area, and I think, he's in his 70s now, so he's probably going to enjoy life a little bit. But a great, great coach is Jim Reed, the type of coach that if I had a son, I would want him to play for Jim Reed.
All right, Rene, early happy birthday to you. Thank you so much for spending a lot of time with us. We didn't, I looked at the clock here like, wow, we've gone long with you. Thank you so much.
Listen, I appreciate it, guys. I wish, the one thing I feel bad, I didn't have more specifics for you, but next time I come on, we're going to be dialed in, whatever conference, American, ACC, we'll have specifics for you, for your fans. We're going to freaking hone in on this thing, and we're going to have football in 2020, guys.
Let's just start practice, and then we can go from there, right? All right. Thank you, Rene. Have a great night, and keep the streets safe in Orlando, my friend.
You got it, guys. Thank you.
All right. Good night. All right, guys. Great show as always, and we'll have another show on Wednesday night, right, Bubba?
Yeah, we will. Actually, tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll be talking to Billy Weaver. Obviously, folks who follow East Carolina know Billy Weaver with WITN, and also back in the days, those broadcasts that we would have on WITN. So, in addition to Billy Weaver, we'll also catch up with a guy named Josh Rudd. He does a tremendous job covering baseball on a number of levels. He has excellent footage on his YouTube channel of top high school prospects, and then also some of the top college prospects that are out there, maybe going from the JUCO ranks to Division I. And he's talking to Division I head coaches, assistant coaches, has an excellent series right now. Me growing up a Braves fan, those tremendous pitching staffs throughout the 1990s with the likes of Glavine, Maddox, Smoltz, Avery, etc. He's talking about those guys. It's called Learning from Leo Mazzoni, at least a 2, maybe 3-part series. So definitely check out our interview with him. And then what I was going to bring up, guys, before we let Rene go, but I didn't want to keep
right back, guys.
Brett McMurphy from Stadium, obviously formerly of ESPN, does a tremendous job staying on top of things, so well connected. Kyle, you may have seen this, but he put this out there today about 1:30, 2 o'clock, saying that Middle Tennessee State Athletic Director Chris Massaro and then also football coach Rick Stockstill will hold a public Zoom webinar on Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern time called Moving Forward with Football. So I'm going to try to check that out on Wednesday. And that's 1 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesday, May the 20th via Zoom. So we'll put that link for Moving Forward with Football with Middle Tennessee State out on our social media accounts on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram.
Interesting. Stockstill, of course, coached at East Carolina briefly under John Thompson and was almost our head coach when we hired Coach McNeil. Things just didn't work out with him and Holland in the contract. But so that's and also the uncle of Bobby Good, former East Carolina wide receiver. So that's interesting. Unfortunately, I won't be able to watch that. I will maybe watch it in replay, but I won't be able to watch it live. Yeah, but that's interesting to see that they're doing that and what kind of ideas they're going to have with trying to get football restarted. And just wanted to say about Rene, man, one of the nicest guys. Dude's been with ESPN for years, and every time he's on, he's one of the nicest people we talk to.
I knew that was going to happen. We almost made it through a whole show without saying Rene.
Rene. Did I do it?
It's your fault, Dave.
Oh, my goodness. That's classic.
It's no compliment him. I call him freaking Rene.
Rene, we love you, man. Thank you to Rene Ingoglia. Kyle from LaGrange Bar, Bubba, you guys are awesome. And we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night. And we're going to put this out on wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and obviously be archived on Facebook Live and our YouTube channel. And you've been listening to and watching The Sports Objective. Go Pirates. Good night, everybody.